What's going on, everyone? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres, publisher and lead editor of Ducks Digest, covering the Oregon Ducks for Sports Illustrated on Fan Nation. And we're rolling right along here in the 2021 season. Last night, we brought you our college football playoff rankings breakdown. And then we're back today for an Oregon-Washington preview podcast with Husky Maven publisher Dan Rayleigh here to talk all about this Oregon-Washington matchup. Dan, how we doing? Thanks for being here.
We're good. We're 3 days away from a good football game, I hope. But we'll see.
Yeah. No, it's a lot is on the line. These two teams didn't get to play last year. So and there's plenty of animosity between the two schools. So maybe that's kind of a good way to kind of intro into this podcast. Take me into a little bit of the mood for Washington fans. Where are they kind of at? It's not been the best season for them, but things have kind of turned around. Two straight wins here and get that win over Stanford. Where are they at?
Well, this has been one of the strangest Husky teams in a while. They have a lot of talent, but they've been really disappointing, and they've been really soft as far as both lines go. And I think their coaching inexperience kind of showed. They had a coaching change last year with Jimmy Lake, and he moved up, promoted, from assistant coach, and he didn't make quite the transition that, say, Mario Cristobal or Chip Kelly did at Oregon. And I thought he got out coached a couple of times early in this season, and it cost him a couple of football games. But as we are at game after 8 games, they looked pretty good against Stanford and pulled it out with 21 seconds to go and showed a little bit of grit that they've been lacking almost all year. So strange team.
Yeah, you mentioned Jimmy Lake, and I feel like, with how crazy Twitter was going yesterday, I have to ask about the recruiting comments that he made with he was asked about Oregon being a recruiting rival for them, and had some comments to say about, we recruit against schools of more academic prowess. What do you make of that, since you're, around this program?
Well, that's another part of his inexperience. I think he was trying so careful not to say anything. Some radio guy said, "Hey, give me one word on Oregon." And he goes, "Nice try." And, so he's trying to be careful not to do anything, say anything that would be inflammatory. And then he just stepped right in it with that comment on the recruiting. And I don't think he even thought he said anything wrong, but that thing was up, like you said, all over Twitter, and ESPN was, showing it within an hour of him saying it. And so it was kind of dumb, but here we are in Oregon, Washington week, where dumb things happen.
Yeah. And then just a quick follow-up for that, Oregon's obviously become a recruiting power under Mario Cristobal. What's the recruiting looking like for Washington? I mean, I know that they're not one of the heavy hitters here, but what's your kind of take on how they've done, bringing in talent?
I think it's really fallen off since Chris Peterson left. He had a class that he brought in last year, and 5 of the 15 guys have played. 1 has started. Sam Heward has not played much. Average class. This one has got really low numbers, and he did get a Texas running back that everybody wanted, like Oregon and Alabama and Ohio State. And that kid's in school, actually passing up on his senior year, but not too much, to get excited about for that fan base. And in fact, they follow it pretty close, and they're really unhappy about his recruiting right now.
Yeah, it seems like it leaves, something to be desired. And we know how big recruiting is in the college football world, but I wanted to start with that one just because I feel like, everybody's talking about it right now. So kind of just transitioning a little bit here and diving into the, on-field product and what we're going to, be in store for on Saturday. I think it would be cool to start with the UW offense and kind of see what we're dealing with there. I feel like a good starting point for any offense is the quarterback, the guy running the show. What can you tell me about Dylan Morris?
Well, he's the shortest starting quarterback in 40 years at Washington. It's 6 foot even. They usually have a big, tall guy, like Jake Locker or Jake Browning was 6'2". But, they've had a lot of 6'4" quarterbacks in the last 30, 40 years. And Dylan Morris was surprised when he won the 4 quarterback competition last year, which involved Ethan Garbers now at UCLA, who's probably going to be a star in this league. And then there was a kid from Sacramento State, a Big Sky MVP named Kevin Thompson, who I think he won the job last year, but he got hurt right before the opener. So Morris was kind of like a default player, got the job, and didn't let go of it this year when they started back up again, even with Heward behind him. Heward, I think, is pretty good, and I think Heward will probably take this job from him when he's been around the program a little longer. But Dylan Morris, he's getting bashed a lot by the fan base, but, you know, the bottom line is he's started 12 games, and 3 of them he's pulled them out in the last couple of minutes. I mean, last week he won it with a touchdown pass with 21 seconds to go. Last year against Utah, I beat him with 36 seconds to go, throwing a touchdown pass to Cade Otton. And then at Arizona, he threw a touchdown pass with 6 minutes to go to beat those guys. So there is some grit to him. He was supposed to be this. He was supposed to have won the job because he was an error-free quarterback, but he leads the conference in interceptions this year with 8, and he's made some bad decisions. So I think he's an average guy. I think he's a tough little average guy, but I think, you know, the fan base wants something bigger and better than him, like Sam Heward, who's, you know, comes in with a 5-star rating and all these gaudy stats of 13,000 passing yards, and he looks like he's a pretty good, you know, quarterback, just moving around. He looks really like he's got a lot of finesse. He's a lefty, and like I said, maybe next year you'll see him running the show at some point. But right now you're going to get Dylan Morris on Saturday, who actually was offered by Oregon, which was one of his 5 offers. He took a visit to Eugene and knew all along he was going to go to Washington because he grew up in the shadows of the program. So,
okay, yeah, cool little backstory there. I mean, I wasn't aware of that as far as Morris's recruitment goes, but, you know, I mean, even if he is an average quarterback, Dan, I mean, I think that if you look at a guy like Chase Garbers, and we were just talking about Ethan, you know, he had a fairly decent day against Oregon. You know, that game came right down to the wire, but I think that Oregon's defense has you know, it looks like they're coming together a little bit more. Obviously, Kayvon Thibodeau hasn't been as available as they'd like, you know, with him having that ankle injury earlier. But with him back, it totally changes, you know, the complexion of the defense and then what the offense is really able to do. And then got a little bit of injuries in the secondary. We're still waiting to see if safety Steve Stevens is going to be able to go. We're recording this on Wednesday. I just got back from talking with Mario Cristobal and some of the players. So that's the latest that we're hearing there, and that's something to watch. But yeah, I mean, it's always nice to get a little bit of a feel for what you know, a team has at quarterback, because that's the most important part of the offense. And kind of just building off of that, this is a team that loves to run the football. I mean, I don't know if that is saying more about the confidence that they have in their running backs with Sean McGrew and Cameron Davis, or if they maybe don't feel as comfortable with Morris. Where do you feel like this team's identity is, you know, at least on the offensive side of the ball?
Well, it's really strange because Jimmy Lake wanted to be a running football team. He thought that would exude toughness and give them this great image. And they didn't do it very well last year, but they came back this year with all 5 starters intact. And it was the biggest line in the history of the school, averaging 324 per guy, with this Ulamu Ali plays left guard. He's one of the biggest guys in the conference. And they kind of came out and fell flat on their face against Montana. They couldn't move those guys off the ball. They got beat up front. And then Michigan just crushed them. But they've started to kind of slowly make it happen and get cohesive. But what they've done is they've changed a couple of the guys. They have a guy that's playing left tackle more often. They have a guy at left tackle who's replaced Jackson Kirkland because he's injured right now, and he's the all Pac-12 guy. I don't know if he'll play Saturday against the Ducks, but they have a redshirt freshman out there who's played pretty well. And so at times they've had 3 new starters, and then they've, you know, pieced it together with these new guys, which is kind of bizarre. But yeah, that's been probably the biggest disappointment, has been this offensive line with all of the background and the size. And I think maybe they got too big, so they weren't very mobile.
Okay, so we're looking at, you know, kind of a team, and I don't think in flux is the right word, but, you know, they're looking to get a little bit more out of the group that they have. I know that they haven't been the highest scoring offense, you know, this year, put up 52 points against Arkansas State, but, you know, we both know that's Arkansas State, so you can't put too much weight into that. But Yeah, with this running back tandem, I think that from an Oregon perspective, if you're looking at kind of the Oregon defensive line against these running backs, I gotta feel like there's some confidence from the Oregon angle here because of the growth that we've seen from the defensive line. You know, Jason Jones, Pope Omavai, they've both taken some big strides, and we're seeing a lot of guys rotating in there as well. So I feel like even though the strength for UW is maybe running the ball, I think Oregon is pretty equipped to rise to the occasion there.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised because they did say, you know, we did well against Stanford is what the coaching staff said, but now we're going to play Oregon, which is a different animal. So we'll see.
It's interesting to kind of look at that though, because Washington beat Stanford and Oregon didn't. I mean, maybe it was one whistle away from going Oregon's way, but it's kind of interesting to look at kind of how how schools in general, just like throughout the year, they share common opponents, and what can you draw from similar or different results as far as that goes. But for some of the other players that we maybe want to keep an eye on for the Huskies, getting to know this team a little bit, Cade Otton, he's looking like one of the stronger tight ends in the Pac-12. And I think he's going to be someone that the Ducks definitely have to key in on Saturday.
Yeah, he's had a tough year because he was supposed to be an All-American candidate, and he got COVID, and it knocked him out of a couple of weeks. And then since he's been back, the opposition just really, gears towards stopping him. So he hasn't done much. And he was like the number one target last year. But, the guys that are doing it for Washington are the two little wideouts, redshirt freshman Jalen McMillan, who won the Stanford game with a catch at the end, and then Rome Odunze. Before he's done, he's going to be one of the better wide receivers in the conference. He's about 6'3", and he's really, really athletic. And so he's the guy that I think Oregon should be more concerned about is Rome Odunze. He missed like the first 3 games with some injury too, but he's come back and he scored against UCLA, and he won the game against Arizona, and he's just a big, fast, athletic receiver, and I would say he's one of the guys that probably the Oregon coaches have really high in their scouting report.
Yeah, Rome Odunze, is that Odunze?
Yeah.
Odunze. He's a name that I recognize, from covering recruiting for a couple years now, and Jalen McMillan as well. I know he's one of their more highly touted recruits that have come through Seattle in recent years. Terrell Bynum is another good name to keep an eye on here. But you hear it from Dan. Keep an eye out for Rome as someone who could really make a difference for this Husky offense this week against Oregon. Dan, what else do you think is maybe worth noting here? We've kind of hit on a couple different guys at different positions on this offense. Anything else that you feel like is worth noting here?
Well, besides the offensive line taking a big hit as being too soft early on, the fan base, the media, we've all been all over this offensive coordinator, John Donovan, who came from the Jacksonville Jaguars, and he was previously the OC at Penn State, and he got fired there. And when he got hired, everybody knew that he'd been fired on the college ranks, and so he was not really accepted in the first place. And then they come out this year, and they've been really unimaginative at times with their offense, and people blame him. And they're really conservative against Stanford, but they didn't make any mistakes. So what they did worked, but they ended up with 4 field goals too instead of 4 touchdowns on those drives. So if it's a coaching battle, Washington's going to come out second best in this one, and I don't think this John Donovan's going to be the offensive coordinator next year, is my opinion.
John Donovan, will he still be in Seattle next year? We'll have to keep an eye on that. But just what you're talking about with Washington settling for field goals, one area that Oregon hasn't really excelled at this year is getting off the field on third down. So will we see Washington be able to take advantage of that and maybe capitalize on some longer drives and maybe turn some of those field goals into touchdowns and put up more points on the board against Oregon? I mean, the defense has been growing, and I think that the pass rush is getting better. We didn't see as much of it last week against Colorado. I feel like they were throwing screens all the time, so that obviously takes some of the pass rushing element out of it. But I think overall, if you're looking at Oregon for Tim DeRuyter, I think that you got to be pretty satisfied with where they're at in year one at least. I think, maybe one of my critiques would maybe be forcing turnovers, just because that was at such a high clip to start the year. And then Bennett Williams goes down and you see a little bit of a lull here. But, you talk about Dylan Morris leading the Pac-12 in interceptions, and maybe the Ducks can take advantage of that come Saturday.
Well, we'll see. I think there's a lot of talent on this Washington football team. I just don't think it's been well coached. So, we'll see if Washington can do something, come up with a game plan that works against, a better football team.
Yeah, we'll have to see if how the game plan maybe looks a little bit different going against Oregon. If there's ever a game to pull out all the stops, it's got to be, this Oregon-Washington rivalry game for the Huskies. But just with the way the complexion of the Pac-12, the way it's kind of turned, I mean, there's more on the line, I think, for Washington than just this rivalry game. If they can beat Oregon, who knows where they could go in the Pac-12 conversation. Yeah,
I think they'd be tied for first if they win this game. And, they all know that. And, Dylan Morris said, practice is different this week than it's been. They got ready to play Michigan one week, but they say, this is the game that everybody's pointing to on the schedule, no matter what was going to happen at Michigan. And I think everybody really understands what this rivalry is all about. And I don't know if I mentioned this to you, but I am writing a book with another guy from Oregon on this football rivalry. And, we consider it one of the 5 biggest cross-state rivalries in the country, next to like Oklahoma, Texas, Michigan, Ohio State, Georgia, Florida. And then I threw in Notre Dame and Stanford, even though I think there's probably got to be something a little more heated than that one. But this one is right up there as far as the, just the hate. Let's just say it straight up. I mean, you won't find another series in this country where one team wins 54-0 and the next year the other team wins 66-0 and it's a 120-point split. That happened in 73 and 74. And those were 2 really bad football teams at each school each year. And they took turns really, lighting it up on each other, and it's never stopped. It's never stopped since then. So
you talk about the animosity and the hate in this rivalry. I think it's really interesting just kind of where we're at right now with the evolution or de-evolution of, these 2 programs, because you look at Oregon, they can hang their hat on being the first Pac-12 team to go to the playoff and they got to win. But that year Washington went to the playoff. They just trounced Oregon at home in Eugene. You got Jake Browning, pointing at these Oregon defensive backs, and when they went 4-8 that year. And, everything is looking really good. And then Chris Peterson decides to step down from the head coaching job there. So I think that's another really interesting aspect of this program, is it looks like Oregon's, on the ascent again, but Washington and other programs that the Ducks have to face going down the line here, they want to play spoiler.
Yeah. No, Washington, used to be the powerhouse with Don James's teams and beat Oregon 15 out of 18 times. And then coaching changed to Jim Lambright, and he opened the door. I mean, he had a chance to beat Oregon, and he threw on the goal line instead of running the football with Napoleon Kaufman. And I think there's a video down there that shows what happened. That's maybe played at every football game, but it changed the whole course of this series. The Wheaton interception, and there was no reason even to provide him an opportunity to intercept that ball and go. But Washington's paid for it, and we're talking 27 years later, and Washington hasn't pulled out of that mistake. I mean, sure, they had their 70, points at Oregon in 2016, and then they won the next year, but they've been on the downside of this series, paying for all of their dominance early on, because I think Washington got really arrogant, when they beat Oregon almost every year and pulled out games that they shouldn't even have won, with a punt return or something like that. But, everything changed on that interception, and everybody in the Duck fan base knows it. And I think everybody at Washington knows it too. And Jimmy Lake's coming into this game with a team that's underperformed. And this game, he should have been a little better situated, to take on the Ducks, because I think it's going to be the legacy of his career, whether he can handle this series or not, because Steve Sarkisian couldn't, Tyrone Willingham couldn't. Peterson won a couple, but he lost more than he won. And so this is the barometer now. It's not USC coming into Eugene or Seattle anymore. That's the way it used to be. But it's the Ducks playing the Huskies, and the Huskies have dropped down a notch, even sometimes 2 notches, and they're fighting to get back what they once had. And it's, quarter century, if not more.
Fun to get a little bit of a glimpse of that history between these two teams in this rivalry, Dan. And I mean, you talk about how it's the barometer for the Jimmy Lake tenure there in Seattle. I feel like it just comes down to Oregon is the class of the Pac-12. At least they have been for the past couple of years now. So they're going to be that measuring stick. How do you measure up against the best that the conference has to offer? And you got to figure it's going to be a huge success for Jimmy Lake if they can knock off the Ducks here, seeing that Oregon's they are going into this one as the favorites.
Right. No, it's it wasn't even close. Way back when during that 12-game win streak for Oregon. Every game was really one-sided, and it's like Washington had a Cinderella deal or something. I mean, once they stumbled, they just really had to pay for their past sins, I guess, of mistreating the Ducks. But it's probably kind of changed, and maybe the Ducks are inviting Washington to get all inspired to beat them now, because the Ducks are in the envious position of winning all the time, and when you do that, you tend to get arrogant. USC's done it, Washington's done it. The Ducks aren't going to be exempt from that. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, just the tone from talking to these players and talking to Mario Cristobal, they're definitely heads down. Just focused on the task at hand. The rankings come out yesterday, but they're, Cristobal saying we can't look past this next game that's on our schedule because that could come back to bite us. But Dan, I kind of wanted to shift a little bit and talk about this Husky defense, because I feel like, when they're really playing some of their best ball, the defense has really been, the big talking point for them. And I feel like when we're looking at the defense, a great place to start is outside linebacker Zion Tupuola Fatui. Hopefully I said that okay. But let's maybe just start there and kind of work our way through some of the big names here on the Washington defense.
Well, to make it easier for you, we call him ZTF.
I was going to try that, but I wanted to give it a shot.
Yeah, no, he was supposed to be the shining star of this football team. I mean, he was supposed to be the best player on this football team. And I'm sitting there at spring practice, and he comes limping off like a pogo stick off the field. Didn't even hit anybody. He just cut, and he ripped his Achilles, and he crash landed on a training table. And before you know it, they're hauling him off on a cart. And then we find out 3 days later that he's got a torn Achilles. And it's like, wow, huge pall over the football team, because he's kind of the heart and soul. I mean, nobody could block him last year. And so he's come back six months off of an injury that often takes 10 months to recover from. And he's continued to get more and more snaps. He's played 3 games now. He started against Stanford. He didn't really do anything at Stanford, whereas at Arizona, he got a sack and got in the backfield. And UCLA really made Dorian Thompson-Robinson nervous at all times that he was in there for 10 plays. But he's still, I think, in recovery to some degree. He's definitely not going to be anywhere near the level he was last year, which, it's levels of your guy coming off the edge, Kayvon and Thibodeau. So he's working his way back into it. The interesting development from the Stanford game was at inside linebacker. Those guys had been average all year, even though Edifon Ulofoshio, we just call him Eddie, he hurt his arm and had surgery, and he's done. And he was a second-team All-Pac-12 guy and one of the leading tacklers in the conference. So I thought they'd really get lit up on the inside row. But Carson Bruner came in against Stanford and had 16 tackles and looked like a star. And he's a redshirt freshman. His dad was a tight end at Washington on their national championship team, and a 14-year NFL guy. So Carson comes in, and we knew the guy was, decent, but he came in, it's like one of those overnight sensations. I mean, he's probably never coming out of the lineup again. And, he was the Pac-12's defensive player of the week and both freshman player of the week. And I just think he's kind of like, the new star of this football team. And he speaks really well. And I think, once they get ZTF back to play with him, the defense will be really, something to mess with, something to be worried about a little bit. But right now, I think with the outside guys still in recovery and Bruner's had a sensational game, but he's still a young guy with one start behind him. There's possibilities, but they're not there yet. The big question mark, the secondary is what their strength is, and that's not even, nothing's changed, even though some of the personnel has. But the defensive front has been kind of soft, and that's been their weakness, where they gave up 343 yards of Michigan and hadn't played well until Stanford. They held Stanford to, I think it was 76 yards, and finally looked well. Looked like they were projected to be, and part of that was because Bruner played so well behind him at linebacker. So, yeah, the defense is solid, but still got a few things to worry about with people not as healthy or as experienced as they should be.
Yeah, Bruner's another name that is familiar, just coming from the Pacific Northwest. So it's cool to see that he's doing well, stepping into a larger role. You talk about the Oregon comparison. They had Jeff Bossa stepping into a bigger role at linebacker as well. Him being a converted safety after big injuries to Justin Flo and Drew Mathis. So both of these teams having to do a little bit of shifting on defense from the sounds of it. But I think with me, Dan, I feel like I'm really interested in that secondary, because I feel like that's been the position where we've seen UW have the most success, and then they're sending guys to the league on a consistent basis at that position, and they have some really good guys playing corner and safety. You talk about Brendan Radley-Hiles coming over from Oklahoma, talented guy who spent some time at Calabasas where Micah Pittman played, and then he went to IMG, and then Trent McDuffie is I feel like the class of the Pac-12 at corner alongside Mikael Wright. What can you tell me about some of these defensive backs and how they might factor into slowing down this Oregon pass attack on Saturday?
Yeah, well, the strength of this Washington team has been the cornerbacks, McDuffie for sure. And then Kyler Gordon plays the other side, and he's a sophomore, but I'll lay you bet he goes to the NFL after this season, because he's probably been the best one back there, even better than McDuffie, who's been a little banged up. So, and then you mentioned Bookie Radley-Hiles, who came from Oklahoma as a cornerback, nickelback. Well, here's the interesting thing about the secondary is they've started 7 different guys in the 2 safety spots, including Bookie Radley-Hiles moved to safety against Stanford. And then next to him was Dominic Hampton, who was a cornerback. And those 2 guys started at safety for the first time against Stanford, and they did well. And they're both physical guys. And the key to the reason there's been so much turnover is there's been injuries, but they started with 2 young guys that just did not, play their scheme right. And they got beat, they got lit up against Michigan for sure. And those guys, are on the bench now, but there's a couple veterans, Cam Williams and Asa Turner and even Alex Cook are all injured, and they all started last year at times and this year as well. So that leaves you with Bookie as a converted safety and Dominique Hampton as a new safety starter. So we'll see if Oregon can exploit those guys, but overall the secondary has been Washington's only saving grace this year as far as being really productive.
The Oregon offense looks like it's turning a corner. You talk about looking back to the past 2 games against UCLA and Colorado. Anthony Brown had those 2 big interceptions that gave UCLA a second chance. But aside from that, he had that big touchdown run that iced the game against UCLA. And then last week against Colorado, he had his best statistical day passing since he got to Oregon, over 300 yards passing, and just the efficiency that Oregon operated at on offense is going to be something that they really need to latch on to and hopefully carry forward throughout the season, because they got some really big games coming up here. It starts in Seattle with one of the stronger defenses in the Pac-12, and I'm going to be interested to see kind of how they're able to. I want to see that DB wide receiver battle, because you have Devin Williams who really looks like he's putting it all together. He's a guy who, since he got to Eugene, everyone's just been kind of wondering, where's Devin Williams? Why aren't we seeing more of him? He's so gifted. And now we're seeing it really come together for him, and he's putting it together. Troy Franklin, freshman wide receiver, has done pretty well. Got his first touchdown grab last week, and the Ducks running backs are really coming together as well. Even though CJ Verdell is out for the year with his injury, Travis Dye has showed no signs of slowing down. He's the focal point of the offense, and then Byron Cardwell really exploded onto the scene last week. So there's plenty of weapons for Oregon to really attack UW with. And even though we don't know just yet if Alex Forsythe's going to play, he missed all of October due to back spasms. Everything we're hearing is that he's going to be ready to go from Mario Cristobal. But even though they've been shifting pieces around in that offensive line, it's really been operating at a high level.
Yeah, well, on this end of it, it's going to come down to the trenches, because people didn't throw at Washington because those guys are, the strength of the team, and the defensive line's been the weakness of the defense. But they did play well against Stanford. They've got people back that were injured. They have a freshman who started at Arizona, a true freshman. He's the best one of this class. If they've solved their problems up front, they'll make it interesting with Oregon. If they play like they played most of the year, Oregon will run all over them.
I know the Ducks love to run the ball, and with how the offensive line has been playing, I think that maybe they have a bit of an advantage there. It's especially after what you were just saying with the defensive line kind of being a bit of a question mark, and we're not really sure what level they're going to play to. But I mean, the Ducks really haven't faced, I think, an edge talent like ZTF this year. I mean, they did have some pretty good defensive linemen against Ohio State. So as I say that, I'm kind of backtracking. And I think they did play some pretty strong defensive linemen, but ZTF is up there as among the best pass rushers, edge defenders for Oregon. So we're gonna have to see if they're able to neutralize him, and how big of an impact he can ultimately have, especially if the Ducks look to push the ball more, because I think you got to build off this performance for Anthony Brown, show that you're confident in him, and definitely dial up some pass plays for him.
Yeah. Well, Sports Illustrated had a mock draft in August, and I think Thibodeau was second overall on the draft, and ZTF was sixth, even as an injured player. So, I wouldn't expect to see him here next year either, with all of the reputation he has right now. But that just shows you, that the potential for this game to be really good if ZTF can play anywhere near what he's capable of. And you've got Thibodeau as the best player in the conference coming from the other direction. That's why they play these games, so we can see how it matches up and see what happens up front, especially. So, and the weather's going to be bad too. So that could, change things around a little bit. We'll see who's more comfortable, Brown or Dylan Morris standing in the rain trying to hand it off or throw it. Because I think the weather's going to be pretty bad, for a 4:30 kickoff. So we'll keep all those things in mind.
Yeah, the weather always can contribute to some chaos. As we wind down here, Dan, I think there's obviously a lot of noise around this game, and with everything that's transpired this year, I think Oregon is appropriately viewed as the favorite. And we've kind of talked about this episode of the podcast, why that's kind of the perception. But just to kind of get things from your angle, what do you think a win would mean for Washington if they were able to pull it off?
It would save this season because there's the Stanford game was just like a nice little Band-Aid over a wound. But people have been really disappointed with this football team, because at one point it had 20 out of the 22 starters coming back before a couple hit the transfer portal. And then, it's just kind of fallen apart. I mean, they lost to Montana. I mean, that in itself was a program rarity, a real blot. Michigan lost to Appalachian State, 14, 15 years ago, and they're still talking about it. How the little guy came up and beat the big guy. It's never supposed to happen at this level. If you compare anything from budgets to stadiums to talent level, but Washington lost to Montana, and that ruined the season to begin with for everybody. And then they got killed on national TV at Michigan, and then they got beat at the buzzer by Oregon State by mismanaging the clock. So there's a lot of disappointment around this football team, which means a lot to the fan base, just like the Oregon Ducks mean, to their followers. And this would go a long way to making people feel better, making maybe the team feel better. But right now it's a lost season, because it was supposed to be so much better.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's especially with like you were saying, those big losses, people are gonna harp in on those. But like we mentioned earlier, with the way the Pac-12 is shaping out, who knows what can happen if they can pull it out in this one. But I'm excited to get up there to Seattle. I've never watched a game at Husky Stadium, right there on the water. Even if it's not going to be, the nicest day, I'm still pretty excited to take it in, and just kind of see what it's all about over there.
No, it's a good football environment, but just the football hasn't been as good as it should be. But that's almost the nature of the college game this year, because there just hasn't been a real super dominant team, with Alabama losing, and Texas was supposed to be back to powerhouse status with Sarkisian, and he's blown 3 gigantic leads in their last 3 games, and their fan base is really unhappy. And there's just been, the Ducks should have put away Stanford, because I watched that game, and they let them hang around like Washington let Montana hang around, and then they got bit for it. But that's been kind of the general theme of this football season, and maybe it's a good thing, because we've watched Alabama and Clemson and Ohio State win all the national titles recently, and it's gotten kind of boring for the rest of the college football landscape. And I think there needs to be some new blood. There needs to be a Pac-12 team in that college football playoff that goes and wins it. And I thought maybe this would be the year. I thought USC would be decent to go with the Ducks, and I thought a decent Husky team, and I thought maybe one of those teams would get in that playoff system and make a run. But the Ducks still could get there and still could do that. But it's time for that new commissioner to upgrade Pac-12 football from top to bottom and make it more competitive. And maybe the rest of the college scene, now we're coming out of this pandemic somewhat, has kind of made things a little bit more, brought more parity to the game, which I think is vastly needed, especially for the Pac-12 to come back in and be a serious entity in it.
Ducks are definitely looking like the Pac-12's best hope now, but like we've kind of been harping on here, there's still so much that they have to do. And then, kind of just to touch on one of my keys to the game here, you talked about letting Stanford hang around. The Ducks got to come out fast in this one. I mean, they did it against Colorado. Really hasn't been a calling card for them. Came out against UCLA and was trailing 2 touchdowns in the blink of an eye. So in a rivalry game, you really can't afford to let your foot off the gas, and they're going to have to come out and really deliver that opening punch. But Dan, it's been great getting to kind of get some insight into the Washington Huskies football program. But before we get out of here, I always like to give guests on the podcast a chance to plug their work, share their work. Where can people find you and more of your Washington Huskies coverage?
Well, we're Husky Maven, and our URL is si.com/college/Washington. And also, it's on Twitter with Dan Rayleigh @DanRayleigh1, and you just Huskies and Dan Rayleigh, if you want to Google it, it comes right up, and that's what we've got.
There you have it. All right, I know Oregon fans, they want to see kind of what's going on from the opponent's perspective. So all the Duck fans listening, go over and give Dan's stuff a read. He's doing a lot of great content over there at Husky Maven. If you want to find more of me, you can follow me on Twitter at that name on your screen there, @mtorresports. And you can also subscribe to the YouTube channel where this podcast will be. It's called Oregon Football Max Torres. So I'm really trying to grow that. And then it just really helps me if we can get some more support there. And then the other social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all @Ducks Digest. Got some amazing photos going out from our photographer, Scott Bolt. That'll do it for this one, everyone. A big thank you to Dan for coming on to break down this matchup, and we will see you in the next episode.